who is Q? Or to put it more clearly, who was Q? Now, this question is very important to answer because someone fed us lots of information that was, in many people's eyes, very, very beneficial. And this information let us know that there was some very nefarious things going on in our culture and in the world, and kind of leaned a certain direction in guiding that. Now, in this, a very powerful mechanism came to be, which was the Q following. And so the Q following would gather this information and then begin to spread it rapidly until it made it into many, many, many households, which in fact became very influential. But a bigger question is who is Zeta, not Q? Now, Q obviously matters. Was this a high-level government official? Was it someone that had the right information? Where did they get their information from? Why did they do what they did? But the fact of the matter is that Q did give some information that influenced culture, and a lot of culture picked up on it very quickly and decided, hey, if these things are true, in fact, we have to act on them. We have to. Now, the thing about it is the source of Q and how it was, passed along. I can understand the nature of Q having to be very anonymous because he or she would have probably experienced probably a job loss, maybe jail time, who knows, maybe they would have been executed if they would have came out openly. But it mattered, the information they were giving to us, because if it was true, simply we had to act upon it. Now let's jump ahead. It was very influential. It was so influential that Zeta was created. Now here is why I say we need to understand who Zeta is. And obviously Zeta is just my term for the counterbalance to Q. So somebody somewhere knew some things that were deep in intelligence, and they began to pass them along openly to the world and saying, hey, this has got to change. Well, to just come along and be a denier was not going to work. People would already deny that any of these Q conspiracies were reality until they finally began to reveal themselves that they were real. And, we're still digging to the bottom of these things. But since flat out denying and suppressing and mocking the conspiracies didn't work, someone very brilliant came along and said, hey, we need to add to the whole Q dimension. And so I believe Zeta was born, which is basically a disinformation campaign that would flow through the same exact channels. This should concern you, because just as quickly as Q would mention something and it would be passed through all these channels and get out to a major portion of the public who was like, hey, if that's the case, we're making this type of a stand. Well, as fast as that information came out, Zeta was created to pass along disinformation to the whole group so as to break down the entire trust network of the Q domino effect. I don't know a better way to explain that. But there have been massive false predictions about the things that are happening in our culture, and it all comes from, really anonymous type sources. And so someone is planting information falsely, and they've created some kind of false narrative that sounds like and sounds similar to Q things, and they have stepped even farther over the threshold of extravagant or exciting or mysterious, and they have planted false ideas and let it trickle down the same information stream that the Q information rolled down. Now, again, I know some people are still debating if all the Q information was correct or not, but what is absolutely certain is disinformation and false information is absolutely rolling down through the channels. And what it is doing, it is creating a distrust in a community that is concerned about the optimum and best health for everybody involved, and it shows that there is a core value system in America that has its stands, just on values alone, thinks that these things have been warped and mutilated, etc. So I'm getting off track. My point being that the informational channel is being muddied with Zeta information. So when an end of the world event is being forecasted again and again and again, and it quickly runs through the channels because all the other information was good, so this information must be good. And then there is disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. Eventually, those that are on the tail end, the largest group that is receiving the information, is going to be like, well, this information is no longer worth hearing. It really is a conspiracy. You see, the truth is beginning to get buried in real conspiracies. So Zeta is coming along and planting this information that's rolling through the chain. Now, we need to preserve the integrity of the underground information community, because anybody that knows the Bible well knows that that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. He has control of the airwaves. Anybody that has tried to promote a very strong Christian message for a long time knows that we are an oddity. We're a blip on the map. We don't control hardly anything. It's very hard to get the word out. So if you become a Christian in Hollywood, you pretty much get blacklisted. If you come out with strong Christian values, you get cast away. If you're a politician and you mention you're a strict conservative, that's less valuable than a general conservative or a liberal conservative. You see what I'm saying? So it is very important for the Christians that are connected, and it has shown to be very influential in the last 2 years of even reversing some of the negative things that were being forced down the pipe. It is very important to preserve the trust of all involved. And to do that, we need to screen and test the information that is being handed to us. We need to pass it along only as theory if we cannot validate it. And we never need to get caught up emotionally like, oh, end of the world, end of the world, end of the world. I got to post this now. I've got to fast forward this to everybody I know. We don't need to be rattled, and we don't need to rattle the supply chain of information for anybody else. We need to be incredibly trustworthy with the information that we spread. Now, I know back to Q, it's an anonymous source, and so possibly, maybe, this sounds like truth. It is something to take note of, etc. But with other information, we need to absolutely screen. And the Q information we even need to screen, because how do you know Q isn't Zeta? So with the information that is coming to us, we need to screen it heavily and begin to think about it, measure it against the reality, and not just add to these things by speculation, but by testing and affirmation. Otherwise, the trust level in the brotherhood of anyone that actually cares deeply about the core values of our culture is just going to eventually begin to distrust each other as much as we distrust overall media presentation of things. This is something to think about and to digest. Please do your best to screen information well and to not just pass along grandiose fabrications, but to say, hey, this is what I've heard. Let's test it. Let's see if there's any truth to it, and not just destroy the channels of information and the flow of information by passing along that which is going to get readily discarded. Now, you got to see this has worked very effectively, that this disinformation has come along. There have been wild, incredible stories that people want to spread and hear, and it's causing a distrust in the channels. You need to know that this is intentional.